Hello everyone, my name is Wiam and welcome back to another episode of Core. On today's episode, we're continuing our Egypt triathlon, which started last week with the Sphinx. Today's episode will discuss buildings which we refer to as pyramids. As a quick introduction to the subject, I wanted to shed some light to things that very few people know about pyramids. Ancient pyramids were coincidentally built on every continent, with the exception of Antarctica, except for that, which nobody really can confirm or deny, despite no acknowledgement by archaeologists that ancient cultures had any communication between each other. There are more than 20 countries that have concentrations of pyramids, but the highest concentration of pyramids is actually found in Sudan, where 224 pyramids are found. Another 43 pyramids are found in Sicily, 3 are found in Valencia, Spain, 104 pyramids are found in the Canary Islands. How did they get there? Nobody knows. Many others were found in Greece, Indonesia, and several other countries of South America, such as Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, and even Peru. At first, the pyramidal designs seem random, but if we take a closer look at the pyramids, we see that they share various similarities despite the huge distance between them. It doesn't take much to acknowledge the flaw in assuming that these cultures were not connected and had no communication between each other at all. But since we had already proved that an ancient global civilization existed in a previous video, let's not waste time on that and dive deeper into the mysteries that are exuded by the Great Pyramids of Giza. When we examine the pyramids of Giza, it becomes quickly apparent that the builders of the pyramids encoded many mathematical principles into their construction. Firstly, when observing them from Google Maps, we can see that they were aligned with the cardinal points to match north, south, east, and west precisely. So precise, in fact, that they point north to within 0.05 of a degree. This accuracy requires advanced surveillance technology that humans only got access to in the 17th century, thousands of years after the pyramids were built. The second thing that becomes evident when looking at Google Maps' top view of the Great Pyramids is the 8-sided geometry of it, which is much more complicated than building a 4-sided pyramid. Moving to number 3. The astronomer Moreau showed that a meridian passing through the Great Pyramid divided the land of the Earth into 2 equal surfaces, making Giza the central point on the planet. This might be shocking, but it's not the only representation of deep knowledge of Earth that this ancient civilization had. Agassiz discovered that the Great Pyramid was a geographic reflection of the Earth. He saw that the length of the 2 sides of the Great Pyramid is the average distance that a point on the equator moves on Earth in 1 second. The next point to unravel is that this ancient culture decoded the size of the Earth in their construction as well. As Graham Hancock found out, if you measure the square perimeter of the Great Pyramid and then you multiply that number by 43,200, it will be equal to the equatorial circumference of the Earth. If you take the height of the Great Pyramid and also multiply it by 43,200, you will get the polar radius of the Earth, which is the distance between the center of the Earth and its surface. At number 6, we have another fascinating point that is very easy to spot for yourself. If you go to Google Earth and find the coordinates of the Great Pyramid of Giza, Its digits match precisely with the speed of light in meters per second. We're basically just halfway through the list, but the mysteries keep getting more and more sophisticated by the second. Moving to part 7, we get an understanding of how the interior of the Great Pyramid was built in harmony based on fractions. If we look at the dimensions of various parts of the pyramid, each part can be multiplied by a whole number to get the total height of the pyramid. Moving past that, we also notice the presence of pi within the Great Pyramid. If we divide the length of the base of the Great Pyramid, which is 1,760 cubits, by the height of the Great Pyramid, which is 280 cubits, we get 2 pi, which is also referred to as tau. This is of great significance because the earliest written confirmation of pi was in the year 1900 BC, a whole 600 years after the pyramids were built, supposedly. This is incredible. But I mean, seriously, do you guys expect me to stop at every single part and say this is the ultimate proof that these ancient civilizations were advanced? I think by now we already figured that out. But let's continue. At number 9, we also infer that the Great Pyramid encoded phi into its structure. The surface of the 4 sides of the Great Pyramid divided by the surface of the base of that same pyramid equals the golden number. This number can also be noticed when we divide the length of 2 consecutive sides of the pyramid by the total height of the Great Pyramid down to its underground shaft. And just to give you a brief explanation of the importance of phi, the significance of phi is found in mathematics due to these 2 equations that work with phi and only with phi, but the significance also transfers over to biology, where the organism-body ratios reflect the golden number in animals, plants, and even humans. Stay tuned for a whole episode of phi in Season 4's Sacred Geometry. Now moving on to number 10, we have evidence that the ancient Egyptians knew the value of the meter. The meter was originally defined in 1793 as 1/10,000,000th the distance from the equator to the North Pole along a great circle. A mere 4,300 years prior to that, ancient Egyptians used the value of pi and subtracted phi squared from it to derive the cubit. Each cubit is equivalent to 1.86 feet or 0.524 meters. Now the derivation of how to get to the meter from the cubit is very long and tedious, but if you insist, you can go to this website and view all the details about it, which I linked in the description below. Now for the 11th mystery, if you were to examine the length of the base of the Great Pyramid, it translates to 365.242 cubits, which just happens to be the Earth here right down to the quarter day. Furthermore, the measurements of the length and the width of the perimeter of the Great Pyramid translate to the ratio of both the latitude and the longitude measurements at the equator. If we scale this up, the Great Pyramid directly corresponds to the circumference of the equator as well as the measurement from the equator to the pole. The next mystery to unravel is the complexity of the interior design elements of the Great Pyramid. Each of these internal blocks weighed between 12 and 70 tons. The blocks were held up about 210 feet, an achievement which even today would be practically miraculous to achieve with the accuracy that it was done by. The tunnel leading down from the King's Chamber is called the Grand Gallery. It looks straight in the pictures, but it's actually a staircase with stepped walls. The function of this sophisticated design was examined by the engineer Christopher Dunn, and it was shown that the frequencies generated in the Grand Gallery propagate and amplify upwards to the King's Chamber. This creates a resonance in the King's Chamber that is so complex and unlike any construction known to us. The 12th mystery is the time it took to build the pyramids. Between 1963 and 1972, the Abu Simbel Temple was relocated as the Aswan Dam was being built to prevent it from getting flooded. Despite the use of cranes and trucks, the relocation of stones took 5 years, and the engineers moved 2,200 blocks that weighed up to 30 tons each. If we compare this with the building of the Great Pyramid that was set to be built in 20 years and had 2 million blocks, that would be 227 times faster than the moving of the stones at Abu Simbel. And that's not taking into consideration the quarrying of even heavier rocks and shipping them from a very far away site. If we take this quarry in France, for example, which is roughly the size of the Great Pyramid, it took 12 years to fill it with rubble, with a truck dumping a load every 3 minutes. Now imagine using 2 million stones and placing them accurately, given all the mathematical calculations previously discussed, and doing that all in 20 years. Something definitely doesn't add up here. Moving on to number 13, which is the construction of the base of the pyramids. If we look at the Pyramid of Khafre, we notice that the enclosure of it is different than the rest. First, the builders leveled the ground and cut 6,000 hectares of bedrock to lower the floor roughly 8 meters below the current state. Then, they fitted the space with many large slabs. The researcher Mohammed Ibrahim confirmed in his research that they used the bedrock itself to carve the first few layers of the pyramid before adding stones on top of it to continue their construction. Now, when examining the stones used at some of the first layers of the Great Pyramid, we also notice similar erosion to that of the Great Sphinx, which we examined in the last episode. In the 14th spot comes the interlocking complexity of the stones at the base of the pyramids. As the stonemason Youssef Aywan explains, we can find in the bedrock of the pyramids 3-dimensional figures that house the tiles, which are shaped to interlock with one another. The accuracy of the fittings of these tiles is so accurate that not even a razor blade can fit between any 2 rocks. Also, think of the complexity of constructing a 3D jigsaw tile made of 100-ton blocks. With the irregularity of the shapes, each stone has to be precisely carved from at least 6 sides. We also find examples of tiny stones made to fit perfectly. These tiny stones are actually used for relief of vibrations. The complex heterogeneous tile system is reminiscent of the walls found in Peru. One more thing to think about is if they were capable of cutting the stones in perfect rectangles as seen here, why would they make them irregular and so much more complicated? This simply denotes that each stone of the tiles was designed and cut precisely. No randomness was exuded even in the bedrock of the pyramids. Furthermore, the shafts found near the pyramids are so deep, meaning the flooring goes several feet under the pyramid base itself. The last mystery to explore of the Giza pyramids is the celestial alignment they exude with the stars of Orion's belt. This theory was proposed by author Robert Bauval, who measured the distances between the pyramids and the angles between them, and matched them precisely with those of the stars found in Orion's belt. This theory is one of the most debatable of the 15, still till this day, and it got Robert banned from entering Egypt for several years because of Zahi Hawass's authority over Egyptology. Now that I made this video, I too could be banned from going to Egypt, but it's alright. I think it's worth the risk to take to ensure that you guys are informed about the truth. And make sure to spread this video around. Just try to avoid giving it to Zahi, please. Now that you've seen all the mysteries that the Great Pyramids of Giza exude, what are some mysteries that you exude? Want to leave them in the comment section below? If not, that's fine, and just stay tuned for next week's episode. Hope you're having a great day. See you next week. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and let's question reality together.